What happens when the most powerful military force on Earth starts quietly packing up its bases in the middle of the night, without making a single announcement, without a press conference, and without a single official stepping in front of a camera to explain why? Because right now, across the Middle East, in forward outposts just a short flight away from the coast of Iran, that is exactly what is happening. Transport planes are landing under the cover of darkness. Equipment is being loaded onto cargo bays. Personnel who have spent months stationed at forward operating sites are suddenly receiving quiet orders to pack their gear and move back. Before we go any further, if you want to actually understand what is happening in the world instead of just watching headlines fly past you on a screen, hit subscribe right now. This channel breaks down the real story behind global power moves, and this move might be one of the most critical developments you will see all year. For years, the United States maintained a network of small, exposed bases scattered across the region. Places in Iraq, Syria, and vulnerable coastal zones along the Gulf. On paper, these bases were meant to show strength. They were built to project power, to show allies that America was present, and to remind Iran that military force was always sitting right on its doorstep. But in the reality of modern warfare, sitting still in the exact same place for years carries a massive hidden risk. The moment tension turns into active war, static bases stop looking like a symbol of power. They start looking like sitting targets. Think about what is really happening here. When a military decides to move personnel away from the front line without launching a public campaign or boasting about it on television, it is almost never a sign of retreat. It is a sign that something far bigger, far more dangerous, and far more coordinated is being prepared behind closed doors. An active base full of soldiers inside the strike range of an enemy is a liability. It limits what you can do. It forces you to defend static positions instead of choosing when and where to strike. So when those bases start clearing out in complete silence, it triggers an immediate question in the minds of military planners in Washington, Tel Aviv, and Tehran. Is the United States backing away from a fight? Or is it clearing the kill zone before the real storm arrives? Because if history has taught us anything about global conflict, the quiet moments right before a major shift are always the most dangerous. The fear of what comes next is real, and the psychological tension hanging over the region is higher than it has been in decades. People watching the news connect these sudden base evacuations directly to one terrifying thought: imminent retaliation, or the opening moves of a much wider war that nobody will be able to contain once it starts. But to truly understand why these bases are being cleared right now, you have to look past the fear and look directly at the cold, ruthless logic of modern military strategy. To understand why these sudden base evacuations are happening right now, you have to look at a tactical map of the Middle East and ask a simple question. What actually happens to a fixed military base when the nature of modern warfare changes completely overnight? For decades, American forward operating posts in places like eastern Syria, western Iraq, and small coastal outposts along the Persian Gulf served a clear purpose. They were small, visible footholds designed for counterterrorism, intelligence gathering, and showing the flag. But in a high-intensity conflict against a nation like Iran, those exact same bases turn into an absolute nightmare for commanders on the ground. Iran does not need to send an army across a border to threaten a static military base. Over the last 20 years, Tehran has built one of the largest and most dangerous stockpiles of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and low-cost attack drones anywhere in the world. Alongside that arsenal, Iran controls a deeply connected network of regional proxy groups, armed militias sitting just miles away from American perimeter fences, equipped with rockets, mortars, and kamikaze drones. Think about what sitting inside one of those small bases actually feels like during a time of extreme tension. Small outpost housing a few hundred soldiers, surrounded by open desert or hostile territory, is completely visible from above. Its coordinates are permanently saved in enemy targeting systems. Its radar coverage is limited. Its air defense systems, while advanced, carry a finite number of interceptor missiles. In a prolonged standoff, an adversary can launch waves of cheap, $50,000 drones designed specifically to drain multi-million-dollar air defense interceptors until the base simply runs out of ammunition. Once those interceptors are gone, every single person inside that perimeter becomes entirely defenseless. This is what military strategists call the kill zone. It is an area where a fixed position offers zero strategic advantage because the enemy holds geographic proximity, endless cheap firepower, and the ability to strike from multiple angles simultaneously. Leaving hundreds of American troops stationed inside that zone while tensions boil over is not a display of strength. It is an unacceptable risk. If a single incoming missile or drone swarm causes mass casualties at an isolated outpost, it forces a massive political crisis in Washington. It limits tactical flexibility and hands the enemy an immediate propaganda victory before a major conflict even officially begins. Military decision-makers in the Pentagon understand this math better than anyone. They know that in modern warfare, speed, mobility, and distance are your best armor. A target that stays in one place is a target that will eventually be hit. By quietly pulling troops out of these small, isolated outposts and consolidating them into heavily protected hubs, or moving them out of the immediate strike range entirely, the United States is removing its biggest tactical vulnerability. If you are starting to see how deep this chess game really goes, make sure you hit that like button right now. It helps this video reach more people who want to understand the real strategy behind global headlines. But removing soldiers from the firing line does not mean the United States is packing up and going home. In fact, it means the exact opposite. When you clear your force out of the enemy's sights, it usually means you are making room for something far more aggressive to take its place. When a military force pulls its troops back from forward positions, casual observers often make one massive mistake. They assume a retreat is happening. They see trucks leaving, gear being packed, and outposts going dark, and they assume one side is backing down from a fight. But in high-level strategic warfare, clearing the line of contact is almost never about backing down. It is about clearing the firing line so you can use heavy weapons without risking your own people in the crossfire. Think about how a coordinated military operation actually works. If the United States or its allies decide to launch a sustained, high-intensity strike campaign against heavy targets inside Iran, the immediate response from Tehran is predictable. Iran will not try to dogfight American stealth jets in the sky. It will not launch a direct naval assault against massive warships in deep water. Instead, Iran will strike whatever fixed, easy targets are sitting right inside its immediate reach. That means those small forward outposts in Iraq, Syria, and vulnerable Gulf locations. If American troops are still sitting inside those outposts when a major strike campaign begins, they instantly become hostages to geography. Every incoming missile fired at a small outpost forces commanders to divert focus, send medical evacuations, and waste critical time defending static points instead of executing their main combat mission. But if those outposts are already empty, if the personnel have been quietly evacuated days beforehand, that massive Iranian leverage vanishes overnight. Iran is left holding a targeting list full of empty buildings and quiet desert sand. By pulling ground personnel out of immediate artillery, rocket, and drone range, American commanders flip the entire tactical equation. They take away the easiest targets on the board. They force Iranian military planners to look further out, toward heavily defended carrier strike groups, moving in open waters, or stealth assets operating from distances that Iranian radar systems simply cannot track effectively. This move also changes the legal and political landscape inside Washington. As long as American troops are sitting exposed in forward bases, an adversary can cause heavy casualties with a single lucky drone strike, forcing the United States into a reactive, defensive posture. But once those troops are safe, decision-makers in Washington regain complete control over the timing, scale, and intensity of their own actions. They are no longer reacting to a crisis created by an attack on a vulnerable outpost. They are choosing when to act based entirely on their own strategy. This is why the quiet nature of these evacuations is so significant. Loud, public troop movements are usually done for political messaging or deterrence. Quiet, systematic evacuations done under the cover of night are done for operational readiness. They are done when planners are systematically working through a checklist to prepare for the worst-case scenario. So, as these bases go dark one by one, the strategic picture becomes uncomfortably clear. The United States is not packing up to leave the Middle East. It is removing its exposed chess pieces from the front row so that the heavy pieces sitting behind them have a completely clear line of sight. And those heavy pieces are already moving into position in ways most people are only beginning to notice. While land bases are being quietly cleared out, something much bigger and far more dangerous is taking place out at sea, completely out of sight of ordinary news cameras. The static land positions that once held small units of troops are being replaced by mobile, heavily armed naval firepower that can move hundreds of miles in a single day and strike targets with absolute precision. Right now, in the international waters surrounding the Arabian Peninsula, American naval power is shifting into a posture designed for high-intensity conflict. Massive aircraft carrier strike groups do not stay parked in narrow, dangerous waterways like the Persian Gulf during a time of extreme tension. Instead, they position themselves in the deep, open waters of the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean. From there, carrier-based fighter jets and guided missile destroyers can operate far beyond the reach of short-range Iranian coastal defense missiles and fast-attack swarm boats, while still maintaining the ability to launch waves of strikes deep into Iranian territory. But the most lethal part of this naval force isn't floating on top of the water. It is sitting silently underneath it. Somewhere beneath the surface of the Persian Gulf and the surrounding seas, American nuclear-powered attack submarines and guided missile submarines are patrolling without revealing their location. This hidden presence creates a massive psychological nightmare for Iranian military commanders. Modern attack submarines carry dozens of Tomahawk cruise missiles capable of flying hundreds of miles at extremely low altitudes, dodging radar, and striking heavily fortified command bunkers, air defense networks, and missile sites with zero advance warning. Think about what this means for the commanders sitting inside Tehran. When an enemy has a visible military base on land, you know exactly where it is. You can point your missiles at it, track its communications, and monitor its daily routine. But when that land base is emptied, and the military power shifts to silent submarines hidden underwater, you lose all visibility. You can never be sure where the next strike will come from, how many missiles are targeting your position, or how fast a response will arrive if a conflict begins. Iran's naval detection and sonar capabilities have suffered from years of international sanctions, limited access to modern technology, and heavy losses during past skirmishes. Iranian commanders know they lack the advanced equipment needed to reliably track American submarines operating in deep water. That constant uncertainty creates hesitation and fear inside every command post across Iran. A patrol boat commander moving through coastal waters knows that an unseen submarine could be tracking his every move, ready to respond before he even realizes he has been targeted. This invisible net of submarines, guided missile destroyers, and carrier aviation forms an integrated combat system. Every sensor, every radar, and every submarine shares targeting data instantly across a unified network. Against this kind of mobile, high-tech force, traditional Iranian tactics, like launching swarms of small speedboats or firing unguided rockets, become almost entirely useless. If you are realizing just how much the balance of power has shifted beneath the surface, drop a comment below and tell me what part of this naval strategy surprised you the most. I read every comment to see what topic we should cover next. But while American forces complete this strategic shift, the true impact of these quiet evacuations is hitting somewhere else entirely, deep inside the decision-making rooms of the Iranian regime. When you look at how the Iranian government has responded publicly to these quiet base evacuations and shifting American naval positions, pay close attention to the massive gap between what they are broadcasting to their own public and what is actually happening behind closed doors inside Tehran. Because when a military force sees its enemy quietly pulling troops out of easy strike range, it doesn't celebrate a victory, it starts to panic. The military planners inside the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IJC, are not stupid. They understand how strategic military doctrine works. They know that as long as American ground troops were sitting inside exposed outposts in Iraq and Syria, those troops acted as human shields that kept the United States from launching a massive total air campaign against critical targets in Iran. The moment those outposts go dark, and those soldiers are moved out of harm's way, that protective shield disappears. Tehran suddenly realizes that the target on its own back just got infinitely clearer. To cover up this growing internal panic, Iranian state media immediately flipped into overdrive, launching a massive wave of propaganda designed for domestic consumption. State-run television channels began broadcasting animated clips and simulated video footage showing American bases being flattened by Iranian ballistic missiles and aircraft carriers being sunk in the Strait of Hormuz. Bold military spokespeople appeared on screen, declaring that any aggression against Iran would result in the immediate destruction of every foreign asset in the Middle East. But ask yourself one simple question: who is that propaganda video really for? It is certainly not meant to scare decision-makers inside the Pentagon. Generals and intelligence analysts do not change global strategy because of an animated cartoon on television. They rely on real-time satellite imagery, thermal tracking data, and classified communications intercepts. That aggressive propaganda is aimed entirely inward, at the Iranian public. The Iranian regime is sitting on top of an internal pressure cooker that is dangerously close to exploding. The country's economy is in absolute freefall due to years of crushing sanctions, rampant corruption, and naval blockades that have choked off oil exports. Ordinary Iranians are living through record inflation, skyrocketing food prices, medicine shortages, and continuous power outages across major cities. Public trust in the government is at an all-time low, and popular protests have repeatedly broken out despite violent crackdowns by security forces. In a system built entirely on fear and military bravado, a regime cannot afford to look weak in front of its own people. If the public realizes that the American military is quietly clearing the battlefield to prepare for a crushing strike, and that the regime's long-promised deterrence has failed, internal revolt becomes a very real threat. So the state media pumps out dramatic threats, loud warnings, and fake victory videos to project an illusion of absolute strength and control. Yet behind the scenes, high-ranking Irgc commanders are facing a brutal reality. The proxy network they spent 40 years and tens of billions of dollars building, militias in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, is being steadily dismantled and isolated. They are watching their static targets disappear, their oil revenues evaporate, and a high-tech naval net tighten around their coastline. This brings us to the ultimate question hanging over the entire global economy and military balance. Now that the battlefield has been cleared, what choices does Iranian leadership actually have left? As those forward outposts go dark and American naval power locks its positions across the Arabian Sea, the Iranian leadership finds itself trapped in a deadly strategic corner. The quiet evacuations have removed the easy targets, leaving Tehran with three extremely dangerous choices, and every single one of them carries monumental risk for the survival of the regime. The first choice is to launch a preemptive strike. Hardline commanders inside the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps might argue that waiting for an inevitable American or Allied air campaign is suicide. They could choose to fire massive waves of ballistic missiles and drone swarms against major American bases further out, or target energy infrastructure belonging to neighboring Gulf nations like Saudi Arabia or the UAE. But military logic makes the outcome of that choice brutally clear. Striking high-value targets across the region would instantly trigger a total, unrestrained military response from a fully prepared coalition. It would transform a controlled containment operation into an all-out war that Iran simply does not have the economic or conventional military power to sustain. The second choice is to do nothing and back down. Iranian leaders could swallow their pride, order their regional proxy groups to stand down, and quietly accept a new reality where they no longer dictate terms in the Persian Gulf. But for an authoritarian regime that has built its entire legitimacy on anti-American defiance and regional dominance for over 40 years, backing down publicly feels like political suicide. It would expose their weakness to millions of angry citizens at home who are already demanding fundamental political change, potentially triggering internal collapse from within. The third choice is to resort to asymmetric, covert escalation. This means avoiding direct military confrontation with warships or stealth aircraft, and instead attempting to covertly sabotage commercial oil tankers, lay sea mines in international shipping lanes, or launch cyber attacks against global financial systems. But as history has repeatedly shown, asymmetric warfare during a high-tension standoff is a dangerous game of chance. A single miscalculation, one rogue militia commander firing at the wrong target, or one sea mine drifting into international waters could ignite the exact explosive reaction Iran is trying to avoid. This is the psychological trap that quiet military silence creates. For 4 decades, Tehran used the threat of closing the Strait of Hormuz and attacking exposed forward bases as a loaded gun pointed at the world economy. They believed that fear alone would always force Western nations to hesitate. But today, that dynamic has completely inverted. The forward bases are empty, the strike groups are out of range, and the silent submarines beneath the waves are holding all the leverage. The gun Iran once pointed at the world hasn't just been neutralized. The hand holding the weapon has quietly, decisively changed. And right now, sitting in dark command bunkers beneath the mountains of central Iran, a regime that built its power on control and fear is discovering in real time that all the propaganda videos in the world cannot change the reality on the water. If this video helped you actually understand what is happening in the world right now, instead of just watching headlines scroll past, hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who needs the full picture, and I will see you in the next deep dive into the stories shaping our global